Good morning, everyone. Is that volume okay? Everyone can hear that all right? Well, good morning. Thank you for coming along. Obviously, it's quite a good turnout. It's a fairly topical issue at the moment, government and Web 2. In fact, just yesterday, Engage, the government's task force on Web 2 was just released. I'll talk a little bit about that by way of an introduction. First of all, my name's John Paul, or JP for short. There's a few familiar faces in the room. I think I've spoken to a couple of you before. There's also a lot of new people as well, because I'm from Squiz, one of the 4 companies represented here this morning, where we'll present our different perspectives on Web 2 and what it means for government in Australia. So first of all, Engage. That's the name of the draft report released yesterday by the task force. And it's really a very bold report. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to have a look at it yet or seen what's been drafted in it so far. And from the perspective of myself, being an optimist, being a bit of an idealist and being an Australian citizen, I think this is an absolutely fantastic thing. But also, as someone who has to be practical, someone who has to run a business and is pragmatic, I realise there's quite a few challenges ahead with being able to implement some of the things that have been suggested and required of this particular document. So as a result, I think there's going to be plenty to talk about today, and I'd like to encourage everyone to engage in the conversation, and there's a few different ways that we can make that happen through the presentation today. I do want to draw everyone's attention to 3 things that I think are important. They'll probably be referred to quite a bit as we go through the various presentations today. The first is Engage, getting on with Government 2.0 as the report's called, says that all major agencies have 12 months to do the following. They've got 12 months from when this report's released to identify barriers within their organisation which inhibit online engagement and develop and explain what they'll do to reduce those barriers. They've also got 12 months to identify specific projects to make use of social networking and crowdsourcing tools and techniques to enhance agency policy making, implementation, and continuous improvement. I probably don't need to read it all, you can see it on the screen. And finally, they've also got the 12 months to identify specific projects to increase the use of online tools within their organisation. 12 months is pretty ambitious to be able to do all of these things, particularly when there are a lot of different issues that need to be considered and balanced with regard to effectively using Web 2 in government. Another really important advance, and this I really do think will make a very big difference in the long run for everyone in Australia, is the fact that there is a strong push to make sure that all data released by government is released in a way that it can be used again by other people easily. So specifically, they're saying that all public sector information should be released under Creative Commons licences, including information created jointly with other companies, other organisations under contract, and that needs to be the case by June 2011. That's a fundamental shift in the landscape of the way people manage information. It's going to make a really big difference to what people are able to achieve in the Web 2 space. And all of the talks today will talk very much about the way you're able to bring different types of information together and what you can use it for. And being able to understand how to work with copyright underneath it underpins that. So this sort of directive is going to be fundamentally important to achieving what everyone needs and hopes will be achieved with Web 2. Finally, the other point that seemed to be made was that the greatest barrier to Government 2.0 is cultural. That's repeatedly referred to throughout the document, and the fact that there's a need for government to take a leadership stance in being able to push this from above and encourage everyone to take this. And I think that's probably part of the reason why the document's written in such bold terms as well. So I'm sure we'll hear a lot about it if this report does end up being adopted in the way that this draft has been presented. One thing I did notice is there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of discussion. There is some discussion, but there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of discussion about privacy, security, accessibility and records. It says all of these things need to be addressed, and there'll be people who are responsible for addressing them. But interestingly, and in particular, interestingly with accessibility and records, which is something that I'm familiar with in my space, which is web content management, the directive says if you can't do those things, just go ahead. It's more important that you get Web 2 going first and you address them when you can. So clearly there's a strong drive to say, get the information out, use these Web 2 technologies. You do have to address things like accessibility and records keeping, but don't let that stop you getting things out there, which is interesting. It's obviously an aggressive and bold step forward in the way that it's moving. So today, in the Web2 Alliance and the presentations that you'll have, we've got 4 different perspectives, 4 different companies talking about their experience as far as Web2 is concerned, and we're all experienced at working with government, so we have had time in the trenches and we can give you those different perspectives. Squiz is obviously web content management. I mentioned that just a moment ago. Funnelback, search. I think a lot of people use Funnelback. Verizon, very experienced on the security side of things, particularly the infrastructure side of the security. And Stamford will be talking about the user experience and how people deal with being able to use all of these technologies, Web2 technologies. We've got a hashtag, Web2All. If anyone has a wireless device here and they want to use it, feel free to tweet questions that we'll then take during the panel at the end. But don't worry, I recognise most people probably don't. We will ask people for questions too. It's just sometimes if people do have ideas on their mind while we're going through the presentation, it's just an easy way to catch them. It's worked effectively at some other presentations before. So if you have a mobile phone or something like that you can tweet from, use it. Just make sure it's turned to silent so that obviously people don't get interrupted during the presentations. In terms of the order for this morning and the run sheet of how it'll run, I'm obviously doing a brief introduction now, and in a moment I'll hand over to Sarah and Craig from Stamford. I'll come back again and talk to you a little bit about the future of web content management a little bit after that, as I see it, and then we'll stop for a break at 10:30. At 10:50, you'll see we'll come back and we'll hear from Funnelback and Search and from Verizon and the security perspective of Government 2.0 before we actually stop for lunch. Now, lunch will be served as sandwiches and finger food, so we should be able to come back here as well, and you can see there's a panel set up for us to be able to answer questions. So please make an effort during the presentations to record your questions so that when we come to that point and we're ready to talk about things, you're able to ask us what's interesting for you. Rather than introducing each of the companies, I'll let each of the companies introduce themselves as they stand up and speak. You've probably read about us already and know something about us from the website, so I won't talk about that too long. And you're also welcome to ask questions at the end of each of the presentations as well today. So if there's something specific that you think of, feel free to ask them. But remember, there is the panel discussion at the end. So without further ado, I'll introduce Sarah and Craig from Stamford Interactive.